Welcome to CrimePod Castle Unsolved Mystery Series, Episode 70. You've brought us a case that's both intriguing and heartbreaking, a real-life puzzle that's lingered for years. The death of Rashid Khan.
It's one of those cases that really gets under your skin, you know, just when you think you've seen it all.
Right. And we're going to do our best to untangle it today. We'll examine the evidence, walk through the twists and turns of the investigation, and see if we can make some sense of the theories that have been swirling around this case.
Ever since that night in 2011.
Exactly. So let's start with the basics. Who was Rashid Khan?
Well, on the surface, he was a pretty ordinary guy, 34 years old, businessman from Kolkata, ran a successful electronics store, well-respected in his community, dedicated family man.
Wife and 2 kids, right?
Yeah, 2 young children.
Tragic.
And by all accounts, a good guy. He even spent his free time coaching youth cricket.
Really?
Yeah, mentoring the next generation.
Wow, so really involved in his community.
It seemed like he had it all, which makes what happened all the more baffling.
So take us back to that night, August 18th, 2011.
Warm evening in Kolkata.
Set the scene for us.
Rashid closes up his shop, tells his staff he's meeting an old acquaintance. Something he did often, by the way.
Okay, so nothing out of the ordinary so far.
Right, totally routine.
Yeah.
But then he just vanishes.
Oof.
Gone.
And this wasn't like him at all.
No, not at all. Like I said, he had a wide circle of friends, business contacts. It wasn't unusual for him to meet people after work.
So at first, his family probably wasn't too worried.
Right, but when he didn't come home that night, they knew something was terribly wrong.
And then the next morning.
The worst possible news.
Wait, his body was found.
On the outskirts of the city.
Belgath.
Blunt force trauma to the head.
And his belongings.
Wallet, phone, watch, all gone.
And to top it off,
Yeah.
his car was found abandoned miles away.
Exactly. It's like something out of a movie.
A seemingly ordinary man, a sudden disappearance, a violent death, and a trail of clues that lead nowhere.
You got it.
So where do we even begin with this one?
Well, the police obviously launched a full investigation.
Of course.
But right away, they hit a wall.
What do you mean?
Lack of evidence.
Like what?
Well, the autopsy confirmed the blunt force trauma, but it couldn't definitively say if it was intentional or an accident.
So right off the bat, they're dealing with ambiguity.
Exactly.
And what about the crime scene itself?
Not much to go on. Poorly lit area, no CCTV footage, no witnesses.
So it's like he vanished into thin air, only to reappear in the worst way possible.
That's a good way to put it.
And then there are the missing belongings.
Right. Seems like a robbery, doesn't it?
At first glance, yeah.
But then again, there are those details that don't quite fit.
Like what?
Well, for one, the level of violence.
You're talking about the blunt force trauma.
Yeah, it just seems excessive for a typical robbery.
Good point.
And then there's the abandoned car.
Most robbers would use the victim's car to get away, right?
Exactly. Why leave it miles away?
It just doesn't add up.
Nope.
So if we're ruling out a straightforward robbery, what are we left with?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And that's where things start to get really interesting.
Buckle up.
Because we're about to dive into some of the theories surrounding Rashid Khan's death. And trust me, they'll leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about this case.
Oh, yeah. This is where it gets good.
So let's unpack those theories one by one.
Okay. Sounds good.
And maybe we can start with that robbery gone wrong idea. You know, since the missing belongings kind of point in that direction.
Sure, it's the most obvious theory at first glance. But when you look at the specifics of the case, some things just don't add up.
Like what are we missing?
Well, think about the typical MO of a robber. They want to be in and out as quickly as possible.
Right, minimize the risk.
Exactly. They're looking for easy cash, jewelry, maybe electronics. They can fence easily.
They're not usually looking for a confrontation.
Right. That's not part of the plan.
So the violence in Rashid's case stands out.
Yeah, that blunt force trauma to the head. It's just a level of violence you don't typically see in a robbery.
Like you said, they want to get in and out fast.
Exactly.
Not get caught up in a struggle.
And there's also the abandoned car.
Right, we talked about that earlier.
Most robbers would want to use the victim's vehicle for a quick getaway.
It just doesn't make sense to leave it miles away.
Nope.
So if it wasn't a robbery, what else could it be?
Well, one possibility is a more targeted attack.
Like a hit.
Maybe. Someone who had a motive to want Rashid dead.
And who would that be?
Well, we know about that financial dispute he had with a business associate.
Right, we touched on that earlier.
Maybe it wasn't the associate himself, but someone connected to him, someone acting on his behalf.
Interesting.
Or maybe there was another financial entanglement that the police never uncovered.
It's true. Money is often at the heart of these things.
And that deliberate head injury. It suggests someone wanted to make sure he was silenced permanently.
So we're talking about a planned attack.
Potentially, yes.
But the police didn't find any evidence to connect anyone to the crime.
True. They went through his business dealings, interviewed countless people.
And nothing.
No smoking gun.
So we've got a robbery that doesn't quite fit. And a possible hit with no suspect.
What a mess, right?
Where does that leave us?
Well, we can't ignore the possibility of a personal vendetta.
You know, those hidden motives that simmer beneath the surface.
Exactly. Maybe there was a conflict in Rashid's life that nobody knew about.
A grudge, a secret affair, something like that.
It's possible.
But again, the police didn't find any evidence of that.
They spoke to his family, friends, colleagues.
And everyone said he was a good guy.
No enemies, no shady past.
So we're back to square one.
Pretty much.
Which brings us to a theory that's always hard to swallow.
What's that?
Random act of violence.
The wrong place, wrong time kind of thing.
Exactly.
It's a tough one to consider, especially with a crime that seems so calculated.
Right, we've already talked about how it doesn't fit the profile of a typical impulsive robbery.
But sometimes the world is just a cruel and random place.
That's the scary part.
And as unsettling as it is, we can't completely rule it out.
So we're left with a puzzle, and we're missing some pretty big pieces.
And it's been over a decade.
And the mystery of Rashid Khan's death remains unsolved.
The cold case.
But even though the official investigation may have hit a dead end, the search for truth continues.
You mean for his family and friends?
For them, for the community. Everyone who was touched by this tragedy.
It's gotta be hard to move on without any answers.
Imagine trying to live your life knowing that the person who did this
Mm-hmm.
is still out there, maybe living a normal life.
That's a heavy burden to carry.
And that's why it's so important to keep these stories alive. To keep asking questions, keep searching for answers.
Even if it feels hopeless.
Because you never know when a new piece of information might come to light.
A tiny detail. A long-forgotten memory.
Something that could crack the case wide open.
We've seen it happen before.
It's why we do what we do.
To give these cases a voice.
And maybe, just maybe, someone listening right now might have that missing piece of the puzzle.
It's a long shot, but you never know.
So if anything we've discussed today rings a bell,
Anything at all.
no matter how small or insignificant it might seem,
Reach out to us, contact the authorities.
you could be the key to bringing justice for Rashid.
And closure for his loved ones?
It's been over a decade, but it's not too late.
Let's keep this case alive.
And maybe, just maybe, we can help bring some peace to those who have been searching for answers for far too long.
I hope so.
Me too. But even if we never find those answers, even if this case remains a mystery, the act of searching, of remembering, of refusing to let this story fade away, that's important in itself.
You're right. It's about honoring Rashid's memory.
And acknowledging the impact his death had on so many people.
It's about reminding ourselves that every life matters.
And that even in the face of tragedy, there is still hope.
Hope for justice, hope for healing, hope for understanding.
Beautifully said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the mystery of Rashid Khan, we want to leave you with a few final thoughts to ponder. What does this case tell us about the nature of truth and justice? How do we balance the need for answers with the acceptance that some mysteries may never be solved? And what can we do as individuals and as a community to support those who are living with the pain of unanswered questions?
These are tough questions.
They are, but they're questions worth asking.
They make us think, challenge our assumptions.
And they remind us that the search for truth is an ongoing process.
A process that requires empathy, compassion, and a willingness to listen.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope it's given you a new perspective on this case.
And on the complexities of unsolved mysteries in general.
If you'd like to delve deeper into other cases like this, we encourage you to explore our archive of past episodes.
We've covered a lot of ground over the years.
And if you found this deep dive valuable, please consider subscribing to our podcast and sharing it with your friends.
We appreciate your support.
Together, we can keep these stories alive and maybe even contribute to a world where fewer families have to endure the pain of not knowing.
That's the goal.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and as always, thanks for taking the deep dive with us.
See ya. It's those unanswered questions that really stick with you.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in the theories and the evidence, but we can't forget about the human cost.
Absolutely. The families left behind, the community, those scars can run deep.
And in Rashid's case, they've been denied even the solace of understanding why.
Yeah, imagine trying to move on with your life, knowing that the person who took your husband, your father, is still out there.
It's a thought that would haunt anyone.
And that's why it's so crucial to keep these stories alive.
To keep asking questions, even if it's been years.
Even if the trail has gone cold.
Because there's always a chance that someone, somewhere, might have that one piece of information.
That could break the case wide open.
A detail they dismissed as insignificant at the time, or a rumor they heard but never reported.
Or maybe a sudden pang of conscience.
We've seen it happen in other cold cases.
A fresh perspective, a new piece of technology.
Sometimes it's the smallest thing that makes all the difference.
And that's why we're reaching out to you, our listeners.
If anything we've discussed today has triggered a memory, a thought, no matter how small,
Please don't hesitate to share it.
you can contact us through our website, our social media.
Or even reach out to the authorities directly.
You never know. You might be the key to bringing justice for Rashid.
And closure for his loved ones.
It's been over a decade, but it's not too late.
Not at all.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the mystery of Rashid Khan, we want to leave you with this. Even if we never find the answers we're looking for, the act of searching, of remembering, of refusing to let this case fade away, that speaks volumes.
It's about honoring his memory, acknowledging the impact he had.
It's about reminding ourselves that every life matters.
And that even in the face of tragedy, hope remains.
Hope for justice. Hope for healing.
Hope for understanding.
So thank you for joining us on this journey.
We appreciate you being here.
If you found this deep dive valuable, please consider subscribing to our podcast and sharing it with your friends. Together, we can keep these stories alive. And maybe even contribute to a world where fewer families have to endure the pain of not knowing.
It's a goal worth striving for.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and as always, thanks for taking the deep dive with us today.